This is Professor Michael Chapman. I'm one of the most experienced IVF doctors in Australia. I believe that an important part that I can contribute is to educate patients in relation to fertility, infertility, and all that involves. These series of podcasts help to educate you. I hope they are helpful to you. If you wish to know more, however, I'm more than happy to have you contact me via email, which is profmchapman@gmail.com, or make an appointment to see me on 9138 4222. Obviously, there are a few topical things around at the moment. COVID is one of them. COVID in fertility, COVID in pregnancy. I start by the bottom line. If you're worried, get vaccinated. If you haven't been vaccinated, it is putting your pregnancy when you get pregnant and your baby at risk. International data is absolutely clear. If you catch COVID while you're pregnant, you're more likely to end up in hospital, more likely to end up in intensive care, and more likely, saddest of all, to have a stillbirth. But if you're vaccinated, it doesn't stop it happening fully, but it certainly hugely reduces it. If you look at the statistics in Australia even, if you look at the people in intensive care, the vast majority of them are unvaccinated people. It's an obvious issue to be not vaccinated and to catch COVID. And that goes whether you're trying to get pregnant or whether you are actually already pregnant. What I say to my patients, one of my first questions when I come to sit down in front of you at a consultation is to seek your vaccination status. And if you haven't been vaccinated, we will explore why not. Now, there's a lot of, I would call it garbage, out there on the net about what it can and can't do to you having a vaccination. But the evidence is absolute. Millions of women around the world in pregnancy have had vaccinations, and there is no evidence of any damage to mother or baby. But more importantly, it protects you from the bad side effects that COVID can give pregnant women. So whether you're going through an IVF cycle now, or you're planning one next month, or you are pregnant now, get that vaccination in as soon as possible. It's going to be good for you and good for your baby. I've had COVID. I had a very lonely Christmas, but all I got was a runny nose. Why? Because I'd had both the initial vaccinations and I'd had a booster about a month beforehand. And I'm sure that's why my case was mild, even though obviously I'm an older, perhaps more susceptible person. Other issues that people have raised recently because of COVID is what's happening in Victoria. And it's a very sad situation there in terms of women, couples trying to have a baby and through IVF. The government, in some sort of blanket rule based upon the concept that staff shortages because of COVID are universal across all hospitals, and therefore all hospitals have to cut back what is not absolute emergencies. And the Victorian government or their health department has the belief that going through an IVF cycle is not urgent or important. You know, if you're going through the process, you want a baby as soon as possible, and delays can impact on your chances of getting pregnant in the future. So they've got a 3-month hold on treatment, even though treatments are being done can be done in day surgical units where the staffing levels are absolutely fine. It only involves a small handful of people who aren't skilled to run an intensive care ward, like a theatre staff, perhaps in a big general hospital. That's what they've done. In New South Wales, at the moment, the view is that IVF is a Category 1 or an urgent Category 2, and therefore is continuing. In the public sector, where there are some clinics based in New South Wales, they have had to cease because obviously their staff in the theatres are available to help out with COVID ward duties or COVID intensive care duties. But IVF Australia has its own day surgery areas. We have fully complied with all the COVID rules and regulations, and the government is letting us continue unabated in terms of IVF treatments. We are fortunate in New South Wales that we have a Department of Health that is not irrational. But, that's not totally unusual for Victoria. for nearly 15 years, they had a rule that you had to get a police check before you could do an IVF cycle in case you're a sex offender or a child molester. Absolutely crazy. They were the only people in the world where you had to be able to have a baby, you needed to be checked to see whether you were a criminal. Fortunately, when I was president of the Fertility Society, we made overtures to the government and they've stepped back from that. That's gone. But it just shows Victoria has a tendency to be extreme, and that IVF is not necessarily one of their favourite areas. But anybody in Victoria wants to have an IVF cycle next week, I'm more than happy to arrange for you to travel up, because at least we can travel between states these days. Someone asked whether during an IVF cycle you continue with the same doctor throughout the cycle. And obviously, in the premium units, we call ourselves premium units, the IVF Australias, the Monashes, the Janaea in Sydney. Once you've got your doctor, that doctor will be the person that will take you through the cycle, do the procedural work, transfer the embryos, will look after you. They'll be the person that your blood tests and ultrasounds on a daily basis will be reported to, and they will be the person that will make decisions on that basis. One of the ways in which IVF clinics can cut corners is to have the doctor of the day. In the budget services, you may have a different, or most likely will have a different doctor each day, looking at your results, looking at and undertaking your procedures. So that's sort of what you pay for by going to a premium unit is that individualised care by an individual doctor. For many patients, that's actually very important. It gives you a sense of security, a trust in what's going on. The other area that we've had questions coming up recently is around sperm donation. Sperm donation has become increasingly popular as women decide that they are keen to have a baby when they don't have a partner. That would predominantly, the ladies I see are women who've just reached an age 38 plus, who realise that without a man around, they're still happy to have a baby, but they can afford to have a baby, but there's no man. So they're approaching us to have donor sperm. Obviously, the other group are the lesbian women who, without a male partner, need to have a sperm donor. Sperm donation is best done through an accredited IVF unit. There are sites on the internet where you can access donor sperm without them going through a proper accredited clinic, but there are risks in that. But more importantly, these donors check for all potential infections that may be transmitted in a donor sample. And beyond that, the good clinics are doing wide-scale genetic testing to look for mutations to avoid you ending up with a baby with a genetic problem. And should any of these detailed tests turn up positive, the genetic team becomes involved and they would advise you on your risks if you were going through with that particular donor. These genetic mutations that we are looking for are actually very rare. Like we're talking 1 in 1,000 to 1 in 10,000. And therefore the odds of you having a mutation similar to that would produce an infected child is actually very low, but it's there. And what we can do by doing these tests is prevent the birth of a child with these problems. What a IVF clinic, accredited IVF clinic, would do is that counselling that I talked about, that detailed investigation, and obviously assessment of the sperm to make sure that it's suitable for you to receive the sperm, to give you a good chance of a pregnancy. Sperm donation is not a totally straightforward proposition. It requires time, and in most clinics in Australia, there is a lack of sperm donors, and therefore waiting times can be long. In IVF Australia at the moment, we do have quite a few donors, and at the moment our waiting list, if you were a single woman or even a lesbian couple, we're probably talking about a 12-week wait between coming to see me, having all that explained, going through the counselling process, and then getting to the top of the donor list. Once you get to the top of the donor list, you'd be coming back to me to talk about how we're going to treat you. To maximise, in a sense, the bang for the buck, most cases, we generally suggest doing IVF. That donor insemination will produce a success rate similar to your normal rate for age, which in, say, a 38-year-old woman has around a 10 or 12% chance of a pregnancy per insemination. With IVF, that will move up to something in the order of 30 to 40% in 1 month. So you can see the difference that's happening.
And don't forget that you can access all the previous episodes by going to our website, www.theivfjourney.com, and select IVF Journey podcast from the navigation menu.